Hi friends, welcome to QApedia and this is our blog qapedia.com. The topic that we are going to discuss today is test cases, and the subtopic that we will discuss today are what is a test case, how to write a test case format, difference between test scenario and test case, best way to write test case, summary of the session, and question for the session. So let's start. Test cases. In the last session, we had discussed about test scenario, which is one of the testing term. And in this session, we are going to discuss another testing term, which is test cases. What is a test case? A test case is an extended form of test scenario. And test cases are more detailed description of a test scenario in a step-by-step manner on how to test a test scenario. Okay? So test scenario were very high-level documentation, but test cases are detailed description, and it is a step-by-step test cases are written in step-by-step manner so that it can tell us how to test a test case or a test scenario. Test scenarios are just one-liner statements, whereas test cases are detailed explanation of test scenario. So test scenarios are just one-liner high-level documentation, but test cases are written in a very detailed way for any test scenario. Test cases is a set of steps, inputs, and expected result. A test case typically includes information such as test case ID, test case description, test input data, and the expected output, and any other relevant information which is necessary to execute the test successfully. So this is all about what is a test case. Okay, now how to write a test case. So we need to follow some steps when we are creating test cases. First of all, we should know that test cases are derived from test scenarios. So the first step that we need to do would be we need to go through each and every test scenario. And the second step, we need to write test cases for each and every test scenario. Test cases will be a set of steps, inputs, and expected results. So we have to write the steps, inputs, and expected results for that test scenario in order to convert it to a test case. So test scenario will be converted to a test case when we will write steps, input, and expected result for that particular test scenario. So this is how we write a test case. Then test case format. So below is a format of typical test case. So we had written some test scenarios in our last session for our calculator application. So we are going to write test cases for a few of the scenarios. So we had seen example of calculator application for which we had written some scenarios like add two numbers, subtract two numbers. We had written some scenarios here in a tabular format: add two numbers, add three numbers, add a positive and a negative number, subtract a small number from big number, subtract a big number from small number. So for these test scenarios, we will write some test cases. So we will take some test scenarios, and for those test scenarios, we will write test cases. So let's see what is going to be the format for a test case. So this is the format where first thing will be the test name or test case description, then step number, what would be the step number, then description of the step, and then expected result. Okay, so let's see the first test case or first test scenario: add two numbers. So for this scenario, we are going to write test case. First step is launch calculator app on the desktop. Expected result is calculator app is launched successfully. And second step, type a number like say 2. Expected result, number is entered. Third step, click on the plus sign. Expected is plus sign is clicked. Fourth step is type a number, say 3. Expected is number is entered. And the fifth step is click on equal to sign. So expected result would be result of the addition should be displayed, which is 5. 2 plus 3 is 5. So 5 should be displayed. Then one more scenario, add three numbers. For this scenario also, if you write test case, how it will be? Same thing, launch calculator app, it should be launched successfully. Type a number, say 2, then number is entered. Click on the plus sign, it should be clicked. Type a number, say 3, number should be entered. Click on plus sign, it should be clicked. Type a number, say 4, number should be entered. Then click on equal to sign, then result of the addition should be displayed, which is 9. 2 2 plus 3 plus 4 equals to 9. Okay. So this was about calculator application test cases. Now let's write the test cases for e-commerce application, for which we had written some scenarios in the last session. So this is our e-commerce application example. For this also we had written some scenarios for this functionality. Create account functionality, we had written a test scenario. Login functionality, we had written a scenario. Search product, we had written a scenario. Browse product, we have written a scenario. So we will take some scenarios. Format is going to be same, test name, step number, description of step, expected result. So the first test case we are writing for search functionality. Test the search functionality for a product like jeans and verify PLP page displays only jeans product. So search product and PLP page. For these two functionalities, we have written two scenarios. So for these two scenarios, we are going to write one combined test case. Okay. What will be the steps? First step would be launch e-commerce website. It should be launched successfully. Then search for jeans. So validate PLP page, product list page should display jeans products only. Okay. This will be the test case. Then we had one scenario for this page, product details page. Verify the product description, pricing information and other things are displaying correctly. So we'll write test case for that. Test the PDP page displays correct product information, pricing info, product description, pricing information, size and color information for a product. What will be the steps? Launch e-commerce website, it should be launched successfully. Search for jeans, PLP page should display only jeans, and click on any of the product. So validate the PDP page displays and it will have correct product information, pricing, size and color information of the product. So this is how we write test cases. Okay. Now difference between a test scenario and a test case. So test scenario is very high level documentation, but test case is very detailed documentation. We have seen that thing already. Test scenario is only a one-liner statement. So we have seen test scenario is just one-liner statement, and test cases has many steps. So we have seen test cases having many steps, 1, 2, 3, many steps, and there are many other components also like test name, description of the steps and expected result. So these components are also there. Then test scenario is derived from requirements, but test cases are derived from test scenario. Test scenario does not contain data, but test case contain data. So you can see here test scenarios you have written, it does not have any data in it. Okay. Test the create account functionality with email ID or mobile number. Test login functionality for validity. But when we talk about like test the search functionality and ensure that product are correctly displayed. So for the search functionality, when we have written a test scenario, there is no data in this. But when we have written a test case, then we have provided test data which is jeans. For we have to test this functionality for this particular test data. So yeah, the next difference is test scenario is all about what to test, and test case is about what to test and how to test. So in test scenario, we will just write what should we test. We should test create account functionality with email ID and mobile number, or test search functionality for a product. But in test case, we will say what to test for sure, but we will write steps also that how should we test it. Okay, so that is the difference. So test scenario is about what to test, Test case is about what to test plus how to test. It takes less time to prepare a test scenario. It takes more time to prepare a test case. This is correct. This is just one liner statement, so it won't take much time. It is having many steps, so it will take more time. Test scenario covers a broad range of functionality, and test case is very specific while checking a functionality. Okay, so if you see this thing, search functionality itself. So for search functionality, when we are writing a test scenario, then we are covering many products. We are not specific to a particular product. But when we are writing a test case, then we are specifically saying that we have to test it for jeans product. Okay, so that's what we are saying, that test scenarios cover a broad range of functionality, but test case is very specific while checking a functionality. Then best way to write a test case. Test case should be simple. We should write it in simple plain English language, and it should be very clear description and expected result in this. Then we should not repeat the test case. We should ensure 100% coverage. Test case name should resemble with the functionality, and write a test case using software testing technique. So we did not cover a software testing technique. So when we'll cover this, we'll understand very easily how should we write test cases. So this is what we have covered today, and summary for the session. So we have discussed below topics today. What is a test case, how to write test case format, difference between a test case and test scenario, and best way to write a test case. And if you want to and the question for the session is that we should write test cases for all the test scenarios that we have discussed in our test scenario session. So in our test scenario session, we have written many test scenarios, right? So you should write test cases for all those test scenarios. And that's it for the session, guys. If you want to get the notes for the session, you can go to this complete blog, qapedia.com. Thank you very much, guys. That's it for the session.